big game changer. And of course, in this case today is going to be Angela Merkel. Now, my series of game changers, I started off by saying that we had, of course, Elon Musk. On the 1st of January, I talked about him as being a game changer. And then on the 4th, I think I had Imran Khan as the game changer for Pakistan. And today we're going to be talking about Angela Merkel as a game changer for Germany. Now, Angela Merkel, I mean, she has been a very prominent leader of EU, not just of Germany. And she came in, this is the fourth stint of her chancellorship. And I'll be talking about her early life, and you can see, and about her qualifications for the job. Now, she has, in fact, shown the way to a lot of politicians as to how to deal with situations. She's not one of those leaders who follows the crowd. She leads. She decides what is good for the country and does that. There's a lot of leaders around the world who sort of feel that there is a certain sentiment in society and they play on that. And then they try to jump on the power on the bandwagon and seek power and do their mischief. And one such one is, of course, Trump. And we see that Brexit is also a result of that type of shenanigans. So we have, in fact, a leadership which follows, not leads. And German leader Angela Merkel is one who leads. And we'll go into her policies and her actions that give her that status. I'm going to go through it very quickly because I've already done this talk and forgot to do the recording. So I'm doing it again very quickly, although I did the Q&A quite extensively, so that's recorded. So I'll patch that up and put it all together. What I'm going to be saying is about her life, her early life. I'll show you some places and pictures of where she was born and when and what sort of qualifications she has had in her early life that she studied for. And her early life in politics, roles that she played, being a protege of Kohl. You remember Kohl? He was the architect of the reunifications of Germany. He put it together. He brought the East and West Germany together. And of course, that was the fall of the Berlin Wall at that time. And the disappearance of the Soviet Empire as well. And there are other things as well for those 1989 date that are in my mind, which happened also to be a very significant date because that was when globalization also made a big way into the world, because what it enabled was to put in these big internet pipes, as it were, between the East and the West, so that outsourcing became possible. That was in '89. Windows came in '89, the usable version. So in many ways, '89 is important. And of course, Angela Merkel lived through that. Now, her policies on the economy and politics and Greens, we'll go through with that as well very quickly. But basically, as an introduction, I can say she practiced an economy of austerity because she believed that you had to sort of live within your means, but create sufficient incentive for the jobs to be created by the industry, by the finance that was available. So her policies did pay dividends and she's created a lot of jobs. And of course, you know that Germany is a world leader in manufacturing on so many fronts. Her politics is coalition politics, which means she brings together a number of people of different views and tries to get a consensus and therefore is successful. And on the social side, of course, she took very big decisions concerned with immigration here and of course on nuclear phase out as well. And we'll talk about a little bit about the Russian pipeline and of course the interaction with Trump. So here, early life, she was born here in West Germany in '54 in a small near Hamburg. But then then her father, when she was just 6 or 7, went and lived in East Germany. So that's where she had her school and her bringing up. There she is as a baby. Her father moved into a farming community and lived on a farm for a while, then moved across to a little town so that schooling would be there. And in that schooling, she sort of did her early sort of studies. And he, in fact, set up a little seminary as a pastor to provide the livelihood for the family. Here she is at the school as any normal school sort of photo, uh, stuck there in the middle. Uh, and of course, she took to physics later on in university and did a PhD. And here it is that she was going into quantum mechanics. So she has a very good grasp of what fundamentals are, because at the very base level, you're talking about these sort of concepts. And she was very familiar with that. When you delve into matter in such depth, you are able to also look at complex social issues realistically and deal with them. Here she is a picture of her married to a fellow physicist at the college, but that marriage didn't last long. But she kept the name Merkel, and that made it life easier for other people to sort of pronounce her name. Otherwise, the name was a little bit difficult to pronounce. Um, in the early politics, she became an early protege of Kohl. When she joined the CDU, he recognized her sort of value and brought her into the cabinet, gave her the position of environment minister, and that has in fact made a big difference to the policy of Germany in phasing out the nuclear, uh, the, the power stations. She married again to this person called Sau, a professor, but kept her name, Angela Merkel. This is the early sort of days of her becoming part of the political sort of activists. And here we are very much taking some power, swearing in. So she assumes the role of some important early political life there. But the real sort of came in the advance for her when she became a protege, as I said earlier, of Kohl, who was the chancellor who brought the East and West Germany together. And of course, once he was involved in financial sort of scandal at the end of his political life, she took over the role, and she had to fight against Schroeder, as you remember, for chancellorship, and she won. Yeah, she's swearing in as chancellor in 2005 and 2009, 2013, 2017. So she had a pretty lengthy stint, if you like. And nobody stays that long unless they have proved themselves. And of course, the people of Germany approved of her policies. Although the policies she brought in were pretty difficult at times, nevertheless, they brought her in, which shows that they had total faith in her desire to serve Germany and to them, not like all these politicians who come to power to serve their own ends. Now, she also undertook to solve some of the crises of the day. And one big one that came her way, of course, was the financial crisis, which she was very much part of it, managed to deal with it. And then, of course, she was also dealing with the Greek fallout. I'll talk about that a bit later. Here, sorry about some of my slides not being in chronological order, but here I've just put together very quickly to give you a flavor of some of the people involved with the images. This is the Kohl having to step down from his role as chancellor because of this financial scandal in the campaign. So he took some money from the people who had money, and that was not allowed as being above board, and therefore he had to pay for it. So Angela Merkel became the head of the party. and at that time, I think it was clear that although she was her protege, she had to sort of take take over because he couldn't continue any longer. Here is a picture of her being very popular as global leader with Obama. Obama had very high regard for her. And of course, I'll show you later on what Trump thinks of Angela Merkel. Sorry. Okay. Now, she also brought about the changes to the party that she was head of. She wanted to make it much more people-oriented, which meant that, environmental friendly and also on social fronts, like here, we're talking about same-sex marriage, and then, of course, bringing in refugees because that was a very humane thing to do at that time. And she thought, this is something that Germany could also gain from. And one of the thinking at that time was not that it was the deciding factor. The deciding factor, of course, was the humanitarian needs of these thousands and thousands of immigrants fleeing their homeland because of terrible wars in their countries, brought about to a large extent by support of the West in many ways, supporting the dictators of the Middle East. So there was a need to show some humanity, and she did that by bringing in taking in the uh, refugees. Uh, Possibly the only big country that stepped forward, and the rest of the European Union didn't play its part as she wanted, although she appealed to them. The party is a bit right of center, meaning basically they're a bit more on the capitalistic side, but not necessarily totally on the center. Now she has a pretty good dealing with the neighbors as well, and one of them, of course, is Russia. With Russia, she, took a pretty strong stand at times, telling him off for the Ukraine and so on. But then she also did business with Russia in that Nord Stream pipeline that has been constructed and nearly completed. I'll talk about that later. Here, Putin is try and see whether he could take advantage of her in some way by, bringing in this dog who she's deathly afraid of. She's afraid of dogs. So whenever a dog comes in, she freezes. So she thought he could sort of unnerve her and try and get some advantage. But of course, she didn't succumb to that totally, and she came out of it well. And he lost. Now, international relations, of course, she's very much successful bringing in these the immigrants. They were, in fact, also needed in some way to be able to sustain the economy of Germany. She also played a big part in saving Greece from the financial disaster it was facing. And, and of course, you remember, I'll talk about a bit more on that. She created a lot of jobs because of this, the management of the economy. She encouraged the investors, but at the same time kept control over the books so as to not become, too much of a spendthrift on the economy. The immigration issues that she dealt with are successful, and it's a lesson for all of Europe to see how she did it. Here she is with the immigrants. Very successful policy she has adopted. Although few of these immigrants, when they come in, they go through such traumatic experiences. Some of them lose their minds, are mentally unsound. One of them attacked one of the girls, and of course that changed the whole flavor and the tone of the German case for immigration. And she lost a lot of popularity for that, and we'll see later how much popularity she lost. Now, internationally, she has been the moral face of Europe because she has shown so much humanity in her dealing, not only with the immigrant, but with the social issues and with the global leaders. And every global leader has been very happy. Although China has been a competitor in many ways, she has worked well with China. And here you can see with the Queen here and all the other leaders very happy with her. So she has been a great success internationally. Now, Obama in particular has made the comment that she is on the right side of history by taking in this immigration. Whereas at the same time, you have, although she was regarded as being the Time Woman of the Year, global leader, world recognition, yet what Trump had to say was deplorable. He said, I'll read to you, I think what she did to Germany is a disgrace. Now, here is a twit of a president making statements like that, as if his sort of thinking makes any difference to a big woman like that. Now, German reunification came about. You remember, Berlin is in East Germany. And at the time of the Second World War, when it was over, it was divided into two, East Berlin and West Berlin. And of course, reunification meant in 89 that Germany became one. But there was a big cost. A huge amount of money had to be paid to try and lift up East Germany. And I think Germany is still paying off that debt in a way to try and lift East Germany up. It hasn't come up to the same level as West Germany even to this day, but it has made rapid, big advances. And because Angela Merkel came from East Germany, she is particularly knowledgeable about what needs to be done. And she has done everything she can to bring about the unification very successfully. Here she's been appointed as a Minister of Environment, you can see, very enthusiastically sort of talking to people. And here is she became the leader of the CDU. Now in Germany, you've got a coalition government, CDU with the socialist government, with the Greens and with the AfD even today. So it's not just a two-party system, but a coalition of people that she has led. And she also formulated a very instrumental, the Eurozone. You remember the Eurozone is where you have a single currency. A lot of countries come together. They say we'll have a common currency. And there are about 17 countries in Europe. In EU, there were about 27, 28 countries. Now that Britain was outside of the EU, of the Eurozone, it still was part of EU until this year. So you have countries in Europe who are just part of Eurozone, but not part of EU. Sorry, not part of EU, but not part of Eurozone. So Eurozone is a subset of EU. Now, this is the impact it had of immigration because, it was such a big scale she did. She's one of those leaders who led, not followed. And therefore, her policy, takes time to be able to deal with these social issues, a matter of integration and being able to assimilation and so on. These don't happen overnight, and because of that, there have been consequences, and therefore there has been a breakaway from her party, and that breakaway is called the AfD. Here you have these coalition of these CDU with Christian Social Union and Social Democratic Party, and that's the CDU there. And when they split over, they became the AfD separately. That had the power until last year, but they are fading a little bit because Angela Merkel's policies are successful. This is showing the economy here. The employment rate has gone down during her time. You can see from being high of 10, 12% down to about 2, 3%. So good job prospects for people there. And that's the spending on the economy that shows up there. I'm running through that because I think you can see these graphs at your own time. This is the bailout of Greece. Greece went into a lot of difficulties because it had very generous, if you like, pension terms. So you could retire at 55, have a full sort of pay or whatever, which the country couldn't afford. And they had a huge army, which also there was no necessity for that. So the condition for saving the Greece was that Germany and the European Bank put conditions which they had to abide by, and a lot of money was pumped into Greece to save it. The result, it impacted the euro. It became smaller. The notes you can see is smaller there. So, but it saved Greece from being able to forfeit on its commitments. some of the things that required was to sort of increase the pension age, also to cut down on the pensions that they were receiving, and also cut down on the army, and some of the assets like ports and all that were sold off to the banks. Now, this is the immigration thing. The immigrants came in because of the Middle East wars that took place. People were running to save themselves, and then from Africa and also the instability down there. Now, Angela Merkel wanted to sort of have a European Union policy of spreading this immigration all over Europe, but none of the people responded as well as she did. Now, here is an example of case where some countries put fences around there so that the immigrants could come. So you could see there was a big sort of fear of immigrants coming into their countries and changing the nature of their countries, which was, I think, really says a lot about how they are unable to handle, big issues, whereas she was able to handle big issues. So it shows the type of quality of leadership that these Eastern European countries had was very poor. And most of them are right-wingers anyway. This shows you basically how many they took in, as approved so to date, and the relative measure of how other countries have responded to giving refuge to people coming in. Some of them were economic, some of them were real refugees. So, but that's where the vetting process takes place, and many are successful. A lot of them are sent back home. The popularity of hers fell. It fell from there to this, from 30 to 15, and you can see this affect the public's perception of her immigration policy. Her popularity has falling down from a high of 60, 70 there. Now, Europe has moved to the right. You can see from this diagram. The dark areas, the pink areas are where the right-wingers are, and the dark areas are less, the more liberal in many ways, although they do have right-wing sort of parties in there to that extent of even 10%. So here is Angela Merkel basically going to be leaving her post as Chancellor after 4 stints. This year, this September, she's going to retire. Now, this is the Nord Stream gas pipeline that she knew that Germany, because her nuclear sort of power stations were going to be phased out and were phased out, she thought she would resort to having gas coming in from Russia. That pipeline was created. And before it was created, short of about 150 kilometers, America started to put sanctions saying, no, if you don't, you should buy gas from Russia because, we are providing you NATO sort of coverage for protection from Russia, and yet you're sort of paying them money. You should buy gas from us. So that has been a standstill. Now that Biden has come in, I think that the project will complete and more gas will be coming to Germany. Now, this was a sanction sort of that threatened by USA, and Russia, UK was also part of that. But most of the penalty would be sustained by the Gazprom, which is Russia. This is just to show that Germany has been exporting more to UK than UK has to Germany. So you can see that's they're exporting 75 billion to Germany. Germany exports 75 billion to UK and imports only 49 from UK. So they have a positive trade balance. And this is also here a picture showing you about the trade deficit that is there with the vis-a-vis EU as a whole. You can see that the blue line exports of UK are at this level between 250 to 80 level. And the imports are this red line, and they're about 67 billion. So there's a trade gap here for UK. But in Germany's case, they have a surplus. So that's all I wanted to say on this. And I'll stop the share at the moment. And
seems to me to be a very odd justification. And the third thing I'll say, and then I'll be done, is I did want your view on the EU treaty with China that's just happened, because that sort of made Biden's situation a little bit harder because he may not actually have the support that he might have wanted to have negotiated with the Chinese. But the EU has done a deal. And as I read it, I understood that it was because of the manufacturer and Germany's business with China that the EU has actually done this deal with China. So that's my lot. Thank you.
Okay, Nimi, thanks for that. I think as far as immigration is concerned, you see, in politics, as Macmillan said, it's events, events that, manage or control the politics. So one can't have an ideal situation where we can sort of bring in a trickle of people from outside and get them integrated. One has to sort of try and solve the problem of the day. And a lot of these problems are not visible until they actually happen. And the consequences of foreign policy is really what we're talking about over here. Now, even if you go back to the recent history of where the Arab Springs and all that started, now that is a consequence of the situation locally in those countries which had despotic rulers who were supported by the West. And that led to a lot of people becoming, in fact, unhappy and exploited. And therefore, they took up opposition to them. With the result, of course, with the arms that these dictators already had, which they bought from the West, they were quelled. And a lot of them were successful. And then when you get a situation like that, then geopolitics comes in. Other powers start to wade into the foray and start to exploit it. And that's what's been happening. So if you start off with a very simple sort of thing there, look, all we want to do is to go and get a bit of oil from Saudi Arabia, the story doesn't end over there. The story actually starts from there. If you want oil from Saudi Arabia, then all that dollars coming into Saudi Arabia had to be retrieved back into the economies of the West. And in order to do that, you've got to get Saudi Arabia to buy the arms, you see? And what are the arms going to be used for? The arms are going to be used to quell the local population or start some, senseless wars in the region, like the Houthi war that is going on for the past 5 years or so. So it's an insane situation that happens. And who are the people who suffer? It is the local people, it's ordinary people. And when the ordinary people suffer, they are driven from their homes. Now, where can they go? And in droves, they go wherever they can seek some sort of refuge. So what it is incumbent on governments who have some stable sort of, or countries which have stable governments, are to devise some policies. And I think Germany has been very successful at that. Despite the fact that they took in a million people, their way of handling the immigrant issue has been very, very successful. The economy has responded, even society has responded. Of course, there was a reaction with the AFD coming in, but the AFD has lost its support now. So it seems to me that they will probably not have the same amount of influence as it was a little while back. So I would say it's a management of how you deal with the immigration. I agree with you, it can't be uncontrolled. It has to be controlled, but how you present it to the public, if you demonize the immigrants as being the problems because of failings on the political front, then of course people, are going to turn against either their party or against the immigrants. So it's so important for the government of the day. Look at Trump; he's exploiting the situation. After all, even if you take what I call USA as having been built on the backs of slave labor, of land given by the Red Indians or taken from the Red Indians, free land and free labor. So if success has come that way, it's not simply because of not these factors. These factors have
Yes.
contributed
Yeah,
both.
sorry, can I interrupt you? That's all correct. But the thing that I find really worrying is this.
Hmm.
I thought the USA was the experiment in a melting pot. And we were all waiting to see how well that would work out. People from everywhere, as you say, contributing and living there. But I think what we have to look at now is to see why it is in the condition it's in, and to what extent, if any, this has contributed to it. And if it has, then we all have to be a bit more careful about what we're doing to the rest of the world. I think it's slightly simplistic to think that everyone comes and then we'll all live happily ever after. Well, that's not happened in America yet, and I don't see any signs of that happening in pretty much my lifetime, because I think things will get worse before they get better, which is why my view on immigration is one of great caution, because I think that's an easy thing to make people unhappy.
I think you're right as to how fast you can bring this change about. Change is always very difficult. But I believe with the correct policies, the management issue can be, dealt with very well. But what happens, unfortunately, is that there are always these demagogues who call on the people who are frustrated for whatever reason of their own, and by their allegiance. Now in America, what has happened is the Trump supporters, they consider that the white privilege is not coming their way, because they have not made any effort at all to sort of improve themselves on any front, but just carry on the way that they had. And they have in fact fallen behind in many regards. And with a society that is now surging ahead in so many fronts, um, it is incumbent on governments to recognize that as an issue and retrain the people, give them really something substantive, and not just rhetoric, which is what's happening at the moment. And that's why America is where it is at the moment. Uh,
Yeah, but sorry, didn't we have a similar thing here as well with Brexit, where, the David Cameron can be all, yeah, we will stay in the EU and all the rest of it, and immigration is good, fine. But he didn't bother to ask the people in Sunderland who were really fed up. And then what happened? They made us come out of Europe, which is obviously, in my view, the very bad thing as it is yours. But I think politicians, maybe because they're only, especially in these democracies, because they're there for a short time, they want to, make a positive impression. So, oh, if the people are happy and they're eating and so on for the time we're there, they'll vote us in again. I don't think there's any long view on it. It's quite short-sighted, I think, which is what Boris is doing now. Oh, let's make Europe the baddie. And then people will not see that, 80,000 people have died in this country and they haven't died anywhere else. So I think politics is tricky, and how politicians deal with these big issues is going to affect the future for everyone.
yeah, you see, UK being an imperialist power that it used to be for 200 years, had left its mark on a lot of people who are in the ruling class. And that mark has been essentially that we can do things better on our own, which is the same sort of slogan that this government is sort of doing. And because of that mindset, what had happened is when the empire was gone, and the mindset hadn't gone, and when Europe came along, even at the Treaty of Rome that took place, the people that were sent from the UK government was just an undersecretary or something to attend the foreign ministers' meeting there in Rome. So you can see this was told to me by one of our U3 classes, one of the governor generals of Malta or somebody who had come in and who knew of that time what was going on. He said there was such a, in fact, low opinion of what the Europeans coming together would do, that they said we don't really want to sort of be part of it in a big way. So you can see there was already a diversion of opinion, or in the mindset that was taking place. And that mindset, led to having Europe being demonized, or not even demonized, but I would say understated to its value. Throughout the last 70 years, we were part of the European Union. So every government is at fault here, not to play the sort of, they played the game of their own failings being blamed on Europe.
Mhm.
So, you can see the captains of industry and the governments and the money sort of, the Tory party is still living in the past, not up to date. And I think it's going to be like that until we have some really good people to lead UK. And we don't know whether this government is going to be good enough to do that. With the likes of Boris and Michael Gove and other people who are still living in the past,
Mhm.
who are really, been more of pro, and with the Jacob Rees-Mogg, they would fit very well with the medieval sort of, days, and we just have to put them in the right clothes, and they would, pick up their horses and go around,
Yeah.
for hunting foxes or whatever else they do. So, so we are in that sort of state of situation at the moment. I think immigration is one of offshoot of that. And the other point was, what was it? The immigration. What's the other thing that you said, Nimi?
I was talking about the EU, this agreement with China
Oh,
that
the
they've
China.
just
Yeah, I think Cameron was very sort of open to the idea of China because Osborne went over there. Anybody with with some little aspect of understanding of China can really make good headway with China.
No,
Uh,
but this is, sorry, Shafiq. This is the one I was reading about in The Economist this week,
hmm.
that the EU has done one now, which was, and the take on it is slightly, well, they've done it just before Biden has come in. So Biden is obviously going to have to be quite careful how he deals with China. And if Europe has gone its separate way for now, does that actually weaken the position of the West, so to speak? So that's what I was talking about, not the general sort of view as
Yeah,
to.
but China has always said that it wants to work multilaterally, and they are open and they want to be able to work with Europe and USA. They have always said that. But I think what is necessary is good leadership in the West. We haven't had good leadership. I think good leadership was there when Obama was there, when very, very sort of, intelligently for that day anyway, he set up this trade thing called TPP. You
Mhm.
remember?
I do.
And that was to try and get all the ASEAN countries and some other countries around there to adhere to sort of common standards so that they can do trade with USA. Uh, and China was kept out of it. And China was waiting on the sidelines because they wanted very much to join. And of course, when Trump came in, he sort of abandoned that TPP. And China said, "Oh, okay, we'll come in and and eat the meal that has been prepared." And they took over. And
Mhm.
and not only did they take over that TPP, but they in fact increased it to become the RCEP. And we did talk about it. The biggest trading bloc in the world today. That was done just a month ago.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
And that type of dialogue, which I think the West can become part of, is, I think, quite manageable. They keep on saying we don't want to be an antagonist, we want to be a competitor. So if one can understand the language of China, then one can work with that sort of, language and with their sort of goals as well. It's a win-win, they said. Why should there should be a zero-sum game? That's what they keep on saying all the time. Whereas, we always seem to go with the idea it should be a zero sum, we should win, and not necessarily you should win also. You should lose. That sort of thing doesn't work in international relations nowadays because everybody has something to offer. And that's why when somebody said, look, we should turn towards India more, the same thing was mentioned on the radio program the other day. India is going to be wanting certain things in return. They're saying, okay, we've got to have our students come in. We want to have workers coming in and all that type of thing. And not just have a market that opens up to UK goods in India. So there's always a trade-off that you have to do with countries. And if the trade-off is going to be of use to both of them, then I think it should be. And that's why the trade negotiations are always very hard. It can't be done overnight. And it takes time now. We'll have to see how successful UK is going to be going solo on its own now. Now that's not part of Europe.
I think Pam was going to say something. Pam and Jim?
Yeah, I was just going to say, Germany in the 60s, they had a policy where they had guest workers in, and they'd invite them in, and they'd even pay them for having more children. And they'd work in the factories, and a lot of Germany's prosperity was made by these guest workers. But when they didn't want them anymore, they'd send them back. So they were only there for, their working life, and they were sent back. So I think Germany has a history of, inviting immigrants in.
And mostly Turks, weren't there?
Yeah, lots of Turks, yeah.
I think a lot of them have now settled there in Germany.
Their children have became German citizens, and there's this footballer, Özil. He was a German. He was a Turk that was born in Germany and became German.
Oh yeah, I heard about him. Yeah, I think Turkey is smart in the sense of being able to have the diaspora of Turks over there who are supporting Turkey in many ways. Like in Pakistan, a lot of this diaspora of Pakistanis, they support Pakistan, Imran Khan, and the amount of remittances they send keeps those economies,
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think there is there's advantage to be had economically by both countries if guest workers come in and do the work. But it's a matter of having to have policies which encourages, I think, a fair play. And not necessarily one, somebody takes all, Yeah, Jim.
It was just really the point we raised before, Nimi, about unrest and racial tensions, and it's really to do with how the social media exacerbates that. I actually attended a world lecture from the Center for Humane Technology by Tristan Harris. He used to work for Facebook, and he created this film, Social Dilemma. And they've actually opened it up to the whole world. Anybody can attend their meetings because they want ideas to effectively find a way to reinvent some of the institutions we've got. He's saying that the institutions, how even Parliament around the world, they're just too slow. It's too slow to adopt to the change. And also people's minds cannot take the pace of change driven by the fact that our attention is being taken by these phones, and the way it's structured with the algorithms to effectively link you with different people who have the same views. That's what's also exacerbating it when you get immigrants coming in. But he's very clever. He's saying, what can we do about it? How can we get ideas from this group? For instance, there may be 100 ideas. He'd say, well, 5 of them are really good. And how can you work those through the technology that people have got in their hands? It's just an interesting, it was just an interesting thing I just wanted to add. And can I just say one other thing is, I think you talked about open AI recently, open AI, because what I didn't appreciate is that every day, OpenAI scans through all the text, all the articles, and gets a consensus opinion, and it's given to all the government leaders. And it could be good government leaders and bad ones as well. They can use that data, so they can judge the feeling of whether what the words coming out their mouth are having an effect. And it could be for negative, it could be racist, or it could be good. And I didn't, and that's another part of the technology. We don't see it; it's all invisible. But that's actually what's going on behind the scenes. I just wanted to, I thought it'd be interesting to everybody.
Yeah, there was a very good program on the radio this morning, which I heard. It was a hard talk by, and the person who was interviewed is the editor of The Guardian.
Ooh.
And he has been, in fact, become part of the oversight by Facebook to enable them to have good policies with regard to good values, good human values. And he spoke about it. He said, this is something that we need to do, because what Facebook, Google, and all that have done is that the engineers have uh, made a platform for people to express their views. And not everybody's views need to be judged as having equal value. So he said what we have to do is to be able to make sure that the type of thing that happened at Capitol Hill and recently about Trump's tweets, and they have, Twitter has blocked him, Facebook has blocked him, and Parler and all those other social media things, they're all blocked now. And the question that is being raised is free speech is being blocked. Well, free speech doesn't happen just in vacuum. It has to have some context and also of value and have responsibility. These are things that need to be discussed by human beings that need to take some little position on that. You can't just leave it to algorithms to decide just by words as to what you need to block and what not. When I was doing my computer sciences in London here many years ago, well, the things that we learned when we were doing computer languages was the grammar. You see, as with any language, grammar is important. But the more important part of the language was the semantics, and the meaning of words, and the meaning of how they're put together. That's a much, much more difficult task. So although we can do the grammar part very straightforwardly because the rules are followed very clearly, but the semantics has to do with values which are not easily specifiable. So that question is there with the algorithms even today. And in order for those values to be reflected in the algorithms, you need to have a lot of input going in. And when you mentioned that, these algorithms search all the newspapers of the world and come out with things like that, that is essentially means that, you were talking about quantity, not necessarily about quality. What you need to be able to do is, of course, to have even respectable, media like Guardians, and he was talking about that. And it's a job of journalists, he said, to be able to put out the reports or the articles in such a way that it is helping society and not necessarily, inciting or making somebody, the culprit of one sort or another. So he said, the only way we can get around this big problem is not to totally shut down everything, but to be able to have more arguments. If you have an argument, then have more and more and more, which he said is ultimately going to be the way that you deal with this question of any position that anybody adopts. But there are, of course, clear cases of one. He talked about nudity being one of those things, that's a very clear example of misuse and abuse taking place. And in the same way, there are those incitement to violence and incitement against people. There are some clear things that you can sort of pick up and sort of stop. And if people say, well, that's, curtailing free speech, then they're not being responsible enough to be able to understand what is meant by free speech, Yeah. So we're going to look forward to a world which I think is going to be quite different to what we are seeing today, simply because of what we call the disruptive technologies coming in. And I keep talking about the disruptive technologies that have come in or coming in very fast. One is the electric car, Tesla. The other one is this AI coming in a big way, Neuralink, and the ability for people to be able to communicate with each other no matter where they are, like with the Starlink. You know, once the whole world gets connected, and it's just not just a connection dependent on how wealthy you are, because at the moment the privilege is with the wealthy. You know, they have better health, they have better homes, they have better opportunities, and so on and so on. So that advantage has got to be, in fact, be provided to everybody in the world, you know, opportunity. And that is going to come through, say, things like Starlink in the future, you know, an oversight mechanism for these platforms, maybe that this guy is talking about this morning. And of course, the ability of these algorithms to be able to do a lot of things for us, which we spend a lot of unnecessary time on, which can be done very easily. Like, for instance, scanning for cancer sort of diagrams or x-rays. They can do it, you know, within a minute, scan through, you know, hundreds of them and come out with a better decision than a radiologist can. So there are those tasks that can be used very, very much in favor of society. And we need to be aware. So the first thing that is incumbent on all of us is awareness. If we are aware, then we can, in fact, do something about it. And quite often, you know, a lot of people not even know. That's why Starlink is so important. That's why good sort of platforms are important. That's why good sort of values are important. And we need to be able to sort of, you know, make sure that we give them the opportunities and not be just led by emotion, like a lot of what these demagogues do. You know, people like Trump and people like the Hungarian fellow, Oran, or the Polish guys, or whoever else is the Putins of the world, and, you know, what have you. These are the guys that are doing an injustice to their people and to the world. Mhm. Yeah.
One point came up was that it should be possibly taught at school how how it works, how algorithms works, and how you manipulate it. That actually, you talked about consciousness, also a little bit about how we create our experience, and that gives us a feeling, you know, how we get tricked by our own experience sometimes, how it's created. Those type of things at a very, very basic, simplistic level, because a lot of people just walk around without any knowledge of how they're being tricked by what somebody says.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's what they were actually saying as a possible solution.
Yeah. You know, sometimes I think with all the sort of automation around us and algorithms around us, there are some fundamental sort of things about humanity that we can sort of look at. You know, humanity can express itself in so many ways, like being kind. Like, for instance, you know, Amartya Sen, the Nobel Prize economist, you know, from Harvard, an Indian guy, he wrote a book called The Argumentative Indian, and also about identity. And he said, look, as far as justice, you know, that's why I keep on coming back to this notion of justice. Justice means the opportunity to be able to have some good values come your way, or have the option to be able to adopt certain things that will improve your life. And as far as the notion of justice, you know, Amartya Sen said, there is no such thing as absolute justice. All we can do is to talk about improving the current situation. You know, make an incremental change. You cannot bring about a wholesale thing just like that, because we don't know what, there's no such thing as an absolute value, if you like, unless you go for mathematical sort of equation and things like that. So when it comes to human type of values, we need to be able to have, I think, some basic human values that we are all aware of: kindness, generosity, charity, love, that sort of thing, that makes for, and in order to be able to provide that, you must have some justice, so that you have some social justice around you. So, life doesn't have to be very, very complicated. One can be made into something which is agreeable and good, unless somebody starts to sort of really take you to task to change your view forcibly one way or another, which is what these demagogues do, Okay, so shall we call it a day now? I
Thank you.
I forgot to record this. I only
Oh,
remembered it when the Q&A started. So I'm just going to
oh,
give you a part of the
oh,
thing clips sent to you. But anyway, we
thank
had a
you.
long Q&A because of that.
Mhm.
All
Well,
right.
thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
It's very
Thank you.
informative.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Bye.